Welcome to this second No Silver Bullet session with Naomi Stanford. We had our first one last Friday, which was a fascinating conversation, and this one will be different, if also similar. And that recording you will also get access to. I'll send that out to you as well as the link to this recording. So is that two for the price of one? It probably is, but you'll have access to that one as well. Just in terms of getting us set up, a few domestics before we do some introductions and get a sense of what this hour is going to bring. A little bit of contracting. As I say now at these sessions regularly, I'm very surprised if any of you is what might technically be termed a Zoom virgin, but nonetheless. So in terms of working in a virtual space, just some invitations for us to remain as present as we can be, notwithstanding other pressures on you, so video on and other apps off and notifications, etc. Mute when you're not talking, be as honest as you can be and as you want to be, and respectful of difference. There may be, these conversations have been interesting, there have been some differences emerge, which is brilliant. And be curious and be inquiring in the dialogue we have. On the technology, as I say, we don't have any Zoom virgins, I don't think, probably. So I'm going to trust you know your way around, and if you don't, I will help you. But we are going to be using menti.com. So if you have another browser window, please fire it up and enter in menti.com, and that code we will use on several occasions to generate a wee bit of interactivity and to generate some data, which also will be shared with you after the event. Welcome, Judy. We're just going through a wee bit of the setup. So that's menti.com. And before I say anything more in terms of myself and Naomi, just to get you settled in and practicing the technology, if you go to menti.com, just an invitation for you to post what questions are you coming with today? What questions are you coming with today? So I am going to just get that set up for you. There we go. And as you enter in your responses to that, they should appear on screen in front of us. So in response to that question, I'm actually going to answer that one. What are the takeaways designed into the session? Very good question. Coming from the writer of a putative book called No Silver Bullet, the takeaways are going to be tenuous at best and very light. The takeaways will be what you take away. Me and Naomi, I think it would be fair to say, have no fixed agenda in terms of what we hope you take away. My hope and my wish would be is that you take away some thoughts, some questions, and having had some useful conversations with colleagues, as I'll explain to you what the format is of today. But there are no guaranteed takeaways from this session. So, anybody else going to enter anything there, or I will just assume you're here out of curiosity and you'll see what emerges. Excellent. Part of an org design initiative, want to get some general tips. Interesting. We're not specifically talking about org design practice, although it is there. So maybe there's some tips emerge, but I'm sure Naomi and myself, if there's anything in particular you want to ask us, and I bow to Naomi in terms of her experience in org design, I play in adjacent spaces, then by all means contact us and connect with us afterwards, and we're always happy to have a conversation. And equally, I know a number of you on this call are very experienced practitioners, so I'd encourage you to connect with each other, because you may find there's a body of knowledge that you have access to amongst your peers now. Has COVID-19 offered silver bullets? Well, on the basis of all the headlines I've seen that said there is no silver bullet to COVID-19, probably the answer is not. So let us progress and move to this. So I'm Steve Hearsum. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a consultant, a facilitator, and also at the moment a writer of a book which is progressing, always more slowly than I would hope, but nonetheless is progressing, which I will tell you about more shortly. I tend to work with organisations that are wrestling with, I would say, a combination of either their strategic alignment and their ability to collaborate effectively. and I do that in multiple contexts and multiple spaces. And I will say no more. Find me on LinkedIn if you haven't already, and connect with me, and I'm always happy to talk more about what I do and how I do it. But in today's context, I'm here with you as the host and facilitator of one of a series of webinars that are emerging from the themes of the research I'm doing as part of the book. Naomi, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Thanks, Steve. So I've known Steve for a good number of years, and we work, as you said, in adjacent fields, but obviously in organisation design and development are very linked. So you have to be fairly pragmatic about the notion of adjacent fields. Like Steve, which is why I was smiling. I'm in the middle of writing the 3rd edition of one of my organisation design books, which is also going much more slowly than I wanted and expected. But it is very interesting. And I recently, about a month ago, left the UK civil service after 6.5 years working there to be more independent and flexible in my time, which is a very interesting sort of move away from being in an organisation yet still talking about organisations. And again, just to echo Steve's point, if you want to get in touch with me, do feel free. Up until the beginning of September, I wrote a weekly blog, so they're all on my website for you to look at. And I will be starting them again, probably in January when I get a bit more advanced with the book.
Thanks, Naomi. Brilliant. So the menu for today, a wee bit about the project for those of you who don't know about it. Those of you who do, please hum to yourselves whilst I explain what you may already know, because I recognise one or two of you who've been on these calls before. Some framing for today. You will then get a chance to have some conversations with a few of the people on this call, and I will offer you a question or a hypothesis to chew on. And then we'll have, if we have time, hopefully we'll have a few minutes for just a bit of inquiry within the whole group of how many of us there are here. And that's really the menu for today. So a little bit of context. Where did this come from? About 4 or 5 years ago, I was working at Roffey Park, which is one of the UK's leading centres of OD and leadership development. And we hosted, I hosted twice, some people from Holland called the Corporate Rebels. Some of you may know the Corporate Rebels. If you don't, I encourage you to go and see their website. They write some interesting stuff. And Pim and Hughes, two of the two founders, went on a 2-year journey to find what were the secrets or the ingredients to creating engaging and fulfilling and happy work environments in organisations. And at one point during one of these talks, I think it was Pim said, we started 2 years ago and we thought by the end of it, we'd find the silver bullet, we'd find the answer, and we'd be able to make a lot of money. And he then said, the thing that we've learned is there isn't one. And I thought, well, so far so much, tell me something I don't know. What was interesting, though, was that in the rest of the day, bear in mind the room was full of about 20 to 30 OD people and consultants and change people who are all, the vast majority, very experienced in their field. 2 or 3 times questions came from the group along the lines of, but there is an answer really, isn't there? There is a silver bullet, isn't there? And you can see Pim and Houston, and I checked in with them at a break, and they said, yeah, no, we noticed that as well. And after that, I got really curious about that phenomenon. I thought about it for a long time. And as I left Roffey Park 2 years ago, what began to crystallise in my mind was a hypothesis. That if you look out there and you look on the internet, you'll see, as you see on screen, there are many examples of people using this construct and this idiom of there is no silver bullet for X. It's a cliche. It's absolutely a cliche. It's part of folklore. And is equally just as much a cliche that there is a silver bullet. And yet paradoxically, we're in a place where there are many people and many players who consciously and unconsciously are colluding with clients who are looking for guaranteed answer, that they can offer them a silver bullet. And if you want the most obvious examples, look at how big consultancies, particularly the big 4 or the big 6, sell their offerings and the degree of certainty with which they do that. Go to a bookshop near you and look at the business books and look at the covers and the degree of certainty which is offered about the solutions within them. Look at the fields of practice, such as organisational development. I'm co-chair of the Organisational Development Network Europe. I'm just off a 2-day board meeting with my colleagues. And you will hear practitioners of the different fields saying, oh, you don't need one of those, you need one of us. The different fields collude with that. And you have theorists and authors and people who are selling methodologies that purport to offer an answer. And on the point of methodologies, and this is where we come to today, theory and practice, there are many theories out there, and just to signpost a few here and the reasons why I've picked them. In org design, you have at the top there, you have something like the 7S from McKinsey, or you have Galbraith's model. They can be construed as offering a degree of certainty. ProSci, middle left, which is a change methodology, one of my clients paid for me to do it early this year. And I was really struck by the degree of certainty that was there in the materials. And what was fascinating was that the facilitator, who was a highly skilled consultant in ProSci and change, he was a really impressive guy, said at one point, 70% of this depends on dialogue. But the word dialogue is not mentioned once in ProSci's materials, in 300 plus sites. And the organisations I know that are wrestling with ProSci, it is bought by senior leaders as the answer to managing or delivering change, but actually it can't do what they want because they're not actually addressing the real complex challenges underneath. Bottom left, to give you another example, that's the latest health leadership model from the NHS in the UK. It is one of umpteen different models of leadership and management that the NHS has sought as the answer to leadership and management in the health service, going back 50, 60 years. There's a report from the King's Fund from a few years ago that lists them. And why is this one any more of a silver bullet than any of the other ones that preceded it? And then bottom right-hand corner, one last one, Frederick Laloux's model for emerging organisations. And Frederick Laloux knows, I've seen him or read him saying that he knows he gets held up as a guru, but he knows it is not as simple as that. His approach to organisations is nowhere near a silver bullet as the other ones. And yet many of these are sold with varying degrees of certainty. So just to ask you a question, what models or theories have you experienced clients treating as a silver bullet? If you would be willing to just share your experiences of that on menti.com. Lindsay has posted in the chat, there's a grey area between purveying a silver bullet and being confident about the outcomes that XYZ can achieve for the client. I agree totally. I agree totally. In the call last Friday, we had an interesting conversation about ethics. And if I speak from I notice in me the tension as an independent business owner and consultant. You know, I need to earn money to pay the mortgage, to feed the family, etc. At what point do I sell with such certainty what I'm offering to a client, even though I know that actually I can't guarantee an outcome? You know, at what point do we as consultants actually not collude with our clients because we know actually we can't offer them that, and yet some of us do. There are moments when I felt the pull or the compulsion because a client wants me to offer them that certainty to help manage their anxiety. Lovely examples here, thank you. Just as an aside, I will be sending out to you a link to a survey that is collecting quantitative data. As part of the project, I've done about 25 qualitative interviews with people including Naomi, but I'm also collecting quant data, and if any of you are willing to fill in the quant survey, I'd love to hear some of the stories associated with this, because there's place in that survey for that. Brilliant. So let us move back. So the hypothesis is this for today's call. Models and theories, as used by us as consultants and practitioners, can be sold as silver bullets and guarantees and answers, and bought as them. And the contention is that this is just another facet of a wider functional collusion. And this term functional collusion is that it serves a purpose. It serves a purpose for the purveyors of guaranteed answers to sell them to people who are desperate or looking for a guaranteed answer. It is a perfectly functional collusion, although in many cases it flies in the face of the reality that underlies that. So where we're going to start with this is we're going to start with a conversation with myself and Naomi, where I'm just going to inquire with Naomi into some of the facets of this before we move into inquiry with you. So Naomi, just to start, what's your initial response to that?
In my working career, I've been both an external consultant. I worked at one time for Price Waterhouse, as it was then PW, and then for Mercer Consulting. And I've also been an internal consultant. So I've seen both sides of this silver bullet fence. And what I find fascinating about it is that this isn't a silver bullet. The silver bullet that people are offering and the silver bullet that people feel they either want to or have to accept for whatever reason, they actually change over a period of time. So lean gives way to agile, and agile gives way to something else, and Six Sigma changes into another thing. And what's fascinating is that then all of them very similar when you start to look. I worked for one organization who'd trained up, it was a very big organization, 1,700 people in lean methodology. And they said, and I went in several years later and I said, what's happened to all the lean? And they said, oh, we've moved on to agile. And I said, and because they wanted help with training people in agile. And I said, well, that's good, because you've now got 1,700 lean people, we can just convert them to agile. Very similar idea. And that would cause utter consternation and kind of indignation that there could be anything similar. The thing about silver bullets is that it attracts purists rather than pragmatists, in my view. And I think that in any organization, you can't expect one thing to work, even if it's a fairly small organization, because within the organization, there are so many different cultural nuances, systems and processes, etc., etc. So even if there was such a thing as a silver bullet, which I don't think there is, it wouldn't be the same one in each part of the organization necessarily. But maybe I'm exposing my hand too quickly, saying I don't believe in silver bullets.
So let's play with this. If there's let's say I have an approach or method which I believe has an high impact or is useful in all circumstances, and that I have experience of it working. Why wouldn't that be a silver bullet if my experience is that it works?
Well, that's a good question, because your experience is limited, regardless of how broad you are. When I think about my experience, it's very limited. I haven't worked in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. So what works in an American multinational, even if it's a multinational, isn't necessarily going to work in another context. A lot of these so-called silver bullets work in some context, which is why it's infuriating when you get people saying, oh, look at Spotify, let's adopt the Spotify model. Because the context is completely different. And your experience, if you look back at your experience, or if I look back at my experience, it's very broad compared with some people's. I've worked in multiple organizations and across the globe, yet it's still limited. I couldn't, if I worked for a family business, which I have done, but in a very limited way, that's a different kettle of fish to working for a multinational energy company, for example. I think we have to recognize that our experience is always partial and limited, and tread very carefully when we're trying to suggest something that works in one context will work in another context.
So building on something that emerged last Friday, which is this question of the projection of expertise. So one of the conversations that you and I had, which when I interviewed was you, I think you said, I asked you a question, which is, do you see yourself as a guru? And you laughed and you said no. And then you said, I think that you have somebody who sells you in a part of the world, and they sell you as a guru, which then, this is a facet, the projection onto somebody like yourself as a recognized figure in the field of organization design. So what about what's the relationship between projection and silver bullets?
Well, that's another great question. Years and years ago, I've read the Alan Watts thing about the beginner's mind, and you always going in with a beginner's mind. And that I would prefer to be thought of as someone who was exploratory than with mind-boggling knowledge. But I do have years and years of experience working in all sorts of different organizations across the world. But I've never felt that that knowledge is sellable as a package of, here's what I know, try it over here. It's only useful as a package of, here's what I've learned in my work, here's how we could sort of approach this and be experimental and try things out and be creative. And there isn't one answer. And I told the story in the Friday one about going to a client, and when I'm doing organization design work, I tend to ask them to, we always end up with 3 possible options of an organization design, and then we discuss it, the 3, and usually come up with some mesh of the 3. And anyway, I was presenting the 3 to the client, and he said, which one is the right answer? And I said, I've no idea. We haven't tried them out or played with them enough. They've all got pros and cons, but different pros and cons. We need to do more explanation, more investigation, or one may turn out to be better than the other if we try them out in a pilot area or something like that. And he got pretty much instantly furious with me and said, look, we're paying you a lot of money to give us the right answer. Which I thought, oh, that's so intriguing.
which is interesting, because where I go with that is the anxiety that must be beneath that. The anxiety to say to you, we're paying you to give us the right answer.
Yes, but that anxiety, that's a very good observation. But the anxiety is one that is not necessarily mutual. Because in my experience, you get a much better result that by not knowing the right answer, because you keep an open mind and then you can see what's going on all the time. As soon as you funnel yourself into the right answer, you're losing a lot of the contextual clues that tell you that it may be going adrift, or that's why you switch from agile to lean, because you've put your faith in one thing. And that the ability to look for contextual clues all the time is really, really important. And you can see when the work that I'm doing now, which is one of the reasons I agreed to write a 3rd edition of the organization design book, is with the last 6 or 8 months of the COVID-19, the organizations which have kept an eye on contextual clues or been able to switch to an adjacent possibility in their kind of field are doing much better than the ones who are more blinkered in, this is what we do.
Yeah, and where you've taken me is, I always like working with what's in the here and now. And on the call today we have Lindsay. So those of you who haven't met Lindsay, say hello to Lindsay. Lindsay, very kindly, she runs a business that offers something called Mirror Mirror, which is a really interesting intervention that's aimed at teams and groups where they're looking to work with strategic alignment and their collaborative practice. And Lindsay very kindly allowed the OD Network Europe board to do this, because we felt it would be useful. Now, the kind of plug for Lindsay is it's a really great intervention, and it worked well, and we found it very useful. But the thought that's relevant to this, and this is why I raise it, is however brilliant the instrument, what really made that work was the combination of the intervention and the Mirror Mirror tool, and I hate the word tool, and the fact that we had a facilitator, the lovely Pascal, who was highly skilled and able to work with both the instrument and with what was going on in the system. So I guess what I'm kind of chewing on is that we may in theory have something that is a silver bullet, but the moment it involves another human being who is having to deploy it and use it, then that's where it begins to get a little bit messier.
Thanks for the plug, Steve.
You're welcome. And Lindsay didn't pay me, just to be clear. She didn't know I was going to say that.
No, and I was actually thinking, I can't possibly suggest that Mirror Mirror is a silver bullet, because there are no silver bullets. And Steve, we had a little conversation about this, and you've already clarified that, of course, It's only a silver bullet if you can guarantee it will always work, which you cannot always guarantee it will always work. So there is no silver bullet.
That's the tension.
But yeah.
So
I think the interesting thing which has happened on Friday, somebody said that people are anxious, back to Steve's point, and maybe the thing that you're talking about, Lindsay, they want a silver bullet to assuage their anxiety and get a result. And the working or not working is subjective. You always get a result. It may not be the result that you wanted or expected or anticipated, but there is always a result of some sort. And that itself is interesting, that, you know, the fact that you might, in your work, Lindsay, it may not work, but you still have done something. Right. And it's had some impact, even if you can't necessarily identify what that is. And you may not know for years and years.
Right, and very briefly, what we're effectively doing is we're capturing how people see their world at work, and we're comparing the answers. So it's all perception oriented. So we're comparing the answers so that we can see where the common ground and the conflict is, so that they can then go and discuss that as a way of opening up a much more specific and data-driven discussion around what is. And we measure the outcomes, and one of those measurements is positivity. And to be honest, we don't care whether people are more positive after the event, because they may well discover between themselves, in the alignment and the understanding between people, that they're discovering things that give them harder work, or news that they didn't like, or information or perspectives that they feel are more challenging. But at least they know more about what is happening in between the team members, and more likely to align on that, which is about more preparedness. So you're right, they probably won't know about it, or at least they won't consider it to be more positive. But it is about giving them something that they can work with, that has a result that they have to take. It's not all about the consultant.
So I'm going to just hold you there. So I'm going to encourage us to do. Ian's posted there is a silver bullet and it's building an inclusive culture. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to suggest that, Ian, I'm going to put people into breakouts now for 15 minutes. I'd love that question or that statement to be part of your conversation. And I'd be really interested in hearing back and chewing on the proposition that building an inclusive culture is a silver bullet, because that raises a whole lot of interesting questions. So I'm going to put you in for 15 minutes. Enjoy your conversations, and we'll talk to you shortly. So welcome back. Sorry to cut you off in your prime. Just waiting for some of the others to return. Oh, where's everybody else gone?
We were given an option of 60 seconds, and our group had finished, so we all vacated. So they're still working using their 60 seconds, so they'll have some good stuff to share, no doubt.
Well, that 60 seconds, Brian, will make all the difference, clearly. That'll be the gold that we need to sift for. They should be here shortly. So whilst they come back, I will start this. If you look at menti.com, there's just a question there for you to share your reflections of that conversation and thus far. So what are your reflections thus far? And let's see what emerges. So welcome back, everyone. So just on menti.com, a space for you just to share your nutshell reflections, not after War and Peace or your favourite classic novel as a metaphor, but just a nugget of your thoughts. Lovely to.
How do you get this to work? To actually put something on here?
If you're on Menti, have you gone to menti.com and entered the code?
Oh, I'm not into the code. And where do I do that?
You go to menti.com.
All right.
Or Ian, if you can't find it, fear not. Just put your thought into the chat. Feel free to do that.
I've done that.
Brilliant. Yeah, the second point there, framing of a silver bullet seems more for simple problems than complex issues. And I think that's the right distinction, that, you know, for simple, complicated challenges, there may indeed be a silver bullet. You know, you take your broken car to a mechanic, he or she will probably be able to find a solution. But complex issues, wicked problems in human systems, that is where selling something with certainty as a silver bullet and a guaranteed answer becomes problematic, and yet there is much of that goes on, and certainly that's the evidence of my research so far and what I'm hearing. Lovely comments there, thank you.
Steve, there is a silver bullet in my experience, and it is building an inclusive culture. I've built inclusive cultures in organizations to deliver complex change, high performance, great customer service, race and gender equality, employee well-being, etc. And I've always had a success through building an inclusive culture.
So there, the distinction I'd make though, Ian, is that predicated on possibly you're the person doing it.
Well, I'm the person who guides the organization on how to build an inclusive culture, yes.
So my question there would be, is it guaranteed? Because not everybody can build an inclusive culture.
I would say it is guaranteed, yes, as long as you've got an expert like myself helping them build an inclusive culture.
Okay, thoughts?
I disagreed on that particular point.
Sorry, what was that?
I think we had some discussion in the group on this, and I think what we understood was that we were understanding the question slightly differently. Our positioning of a silver bullet is something relatively simple and straightforward that will address a much broader, bigger challenge question. And building an inclusive culture we didn't perceive to be something that was relatively simple and straightforward. But there was also the question of, I think Liz said, you know, to what end? What is it that we're supposedly operating in service of? Because an awful lot of the conversation, I obviously joined a little bit late, but from what I've heard thus far, it all seems to be OD person-centric. It's all about us.
Yeah. Naomi, you're about to say something?
Well, I was just wondering what our definition of inclusive was. and who are you including in inclusive? And how does your personal value set fit with inclusion? And would you include every single human being on the planet in your definition of inclusiveness? I haven't worked in an organization where there haven't been at some level in groups and out groups, and the boundaries between them, even if they're shifting, are kind of observable. But I've worked in some societies where inclusion would just not be, in a kind of Western sense, would not be kind of allowable, even in legal terms. You know, there are working in Saudi Arabia. When I got an email from someone who, at the beginning of the year, I think, or last year, a woman, she was in the first group of women who was allowed a driving license. And, you know, she works in an organization. How do you accommodate, what is your definition of inclusion in that kind of environment?
Are you asking me that?
May I just offer, you know, the sort of the the values of sort of openness and mutual respect for me tend to sort of sum up an inclusive guide to behaviours around what does that mean then? Because when there is mutual respect and openness, people are then able to much more readily communicate with each other, which then leads on to a whole load of other, which is an enabler fundamentally. And I think, to your point, Angus, about is this all OD chat? Well, that's when it transfers into the reciprocation needed within the organisation to pick that up as they are in the hands of the expert OD practitioner or whatever that is hoping that they will bring that to the fore, that they need to then take the baton and do something with that to turn it into something that works for them. And inclusivity leads to so much stuff because it's about communication.
Other thoughts? More questions? Liz, you're on mute.
On a slightly more general point than...
Oh, sorry, David, Liz was just talking. So
sorry.
We'll go Liz first, then David.
Well, I just really loved how Naomi's kind of pushback, really. I think it's much more nuanced. So again, silver bullet and a nuanced, like this question around working with the polarity between inclusion and exclusion. How you work, some are included, some are then excluded, and the point about what you just raised about Saudi Arabia, I don't know the cultural side of it. There's so many nuances here, and so silver bullet for me, I think to conjoin the two just doesn't kind of fit for me. It's going like that. And I just was very interested in Ryan's response and be interested to hear what people made of that in terms of silver bullet. Yeah.
Lovely. David?
I think we were talking in our breakout group, and the bane of my entire career has been pushy salespeople who sort of sell a very simple, easy view of the world in whatever discipline, whether they're selling software or digital transformation or organizational improvement or whatever they're doing. And executives who, for whatever reason, ignorance, desperation to, anxiety, want to hear that simple message. And how do honest people who accept the nuances, complexity of the real world, who know that the only way to do something is through a long collaborative process that will be probably unique in that scenario, using knowledge from other companies, from other disciplines, but going on a journey with a consultant and a client. How do those honest people cope in this world full of people giving these simple answers, in a very confident way, and exec who are lapping it up? Because it's been the bane of my last 20 years, because I'm a more truthful person and I see how the world really works, and I see that the results that all these people claim do not get achieved, and if they're, sometimes program managers and people will bend the facts in their sort of post-implementation review to try and make it seem that they did, but they generally don't. And how do we cut through that? How do we influence executives to listen to the more honest voices than the people who will lead them in the wrong direction for reasons of money? And I don't know what the answer is, but I wish the world was slightly different. And I like the fact, everything Naomi said and what Steve was saying, this is exactly, I totally buy into, that more nuanced, complex view of the world. And yeah, setting someone like Naomi up as a guru, no one, you throw somebody into a new situation, Naomi's got the skills to help work through the problem with them, but not just go bang, 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 there's your answer and walk out the door. And these exec need to be educated somehow that not to expect that, but half the world wants to tell them the opposite. So
thank you, David.
I think
so I'm just conscious.
Sorry, Steve.
So I'm just saying, I'm conscious of time, Naomi. So if you do the last comment, and then we'll just move to wrap up.
It was really in response to David's point, because one of the things that I spend quite a lot of time on is looking at the performance management systems, because they systematically quite often kind of foster or enable exactly the sort of thing that you're talking about. And that is a kind of by mistake. It's not intentional at all. But because they're not critically thought through, and there are multiple examples of better performance management systems, if we needed a performance management system at all, which is, again, a big question, not in the last 2 minutes, then you might get different forms of inclusion or openness or transparency or whatever. Because some of them are result in gaming the system to meet your performance objective for whatever motivation is your motivator.
Thanks, Naomi. So just briefly, in fact, before I do that, I'm just going to say this. I wanted to emphasise that, you know, those of you who may have thought there's going to be a neat answer to this, there isn't. This webinar is part of a series that are in effect part of an open inquiry. So they're very intentionally designed to be conversational spaces where we have a hypothesis and we delve a bit deep into aspects of this. And I'm noticing there's some threads hanging from this, you know, and there may be some more conversations that you want to have either with each other or with me or with Naomi. And that was my expectation and my hope, that this was not going to be neatly concluded. In response to this idea of, you know, is there an answer? I will share this with you in terms of what's coming through in the research. The closest, and this actually does relate, although Ian and I think we have some really interesting conversations about inclusive leadership, which I'd love to pursue. The interesting overlap between what Ian's saying and what's emerging as the closest thing to a silver bullet many of my interviewers can offer is nobody said that they could guarantee one, but the closest thing was a well-constructed, well-designed space where people can ask any question and where there is sufficient psychological safety to do so. And that's an inclusive culture. Yeah, and that form, yes, absolutely. So there is permission, there is sufficient psychological safety for inclusion of all perspectives. And that's the overlapping with what you're saying, and that comes through very strongly in the interviews. So in terms of, just very briefly, what's next? You will get links to both recordings to both webinars. There is a newsletter if you want to sign up for it, but obviously that's entirely up to you. I am planning 1 or 2 other webinars, but I'd love you to message me if there's anything in particular that you're thinking that's an aspect of this whole thread of inquiry around silver bullets and how that relates to human systems and organisations and leadership that I'd love you to do some stuff on, Steve. Then let me know and I'll see if I can find somebody who can come along and be part of an inquiry. Finally, I'd be really grateful if on mentimeter.com you would very simply just tell me what you thought of today. So if my screen will work, that would be really helpful. And move it. Bear with me. Sorry, it would help if my technology will work at my end. Right. Okay, and on mentimeter.com you'll find something there that just gives you, oh, beg your pardon, no, it's not that one, I want the next one. Yeah, that's the one I want. How was today for you, other than Steve's last minute technological glitch? And aside from that, it's a thank you to Naomi for her time, both Friday and today, and thank you for coming and playing. I hope it was useful, and if it wasn't useful, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, if nothing else. And I will hopefully see you again on one of the future calls. The book, as yet, it does not have a publishing date. I'm talking to publishers at the moment, but I'm hoping that it will emerge some point from gestation in the next 18 months or so. Until next time.
Steve.
Thank you all.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Naomi. Great stuff. Good luck on your book, Steve.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye.